After completing my 10th class exams in 1979, my father suggested that I go and help my father's uncle and learn astrology. Mathematics being my favorite subject, I learned the calculations. My grandfather taught me how to calculate the inclinations of each planet and how to calculate the lagna and the meridian center MC. And he gave me some birth charts to draw. Thus, I learned how to draw the birth charts first and showed interest in predictions. So my grandfather told me some predictions, some of the tips that he usually uses for predictions, and after learning those tips I documented some of them. I verified with my father. While my father and my grandfather have laid the foundation for me to get interested in astrology, for almost a decade or 2 decades, I didn't show any interest. Welcome to Shastri Kara's astrological series. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about the US presidential elections that's going to happen on first Tuesday in the month of November 2020, which is 3rd November 2020. The elections will start somewhere around 7 a.m. Local time, and it will go all the way till 7 p.m. local time, which is 10 p.m. If it is 7 p.m. in California, then it's almost equal to 10 p.m. in New York City. So I took the 9 p.m. as the time because by 9 p.m. most of the states will declare who won the presidential election. So I took the 9 p.m. as the time when most of the results will be declared, and in this presentation I'm going to take the birth chart of the United States, superimpose the transit planets at 9 p.m. Washington DC on 3rd November, and then try to do the analysis and try to explain how these transit planets are impacting the natal chart. And based on the Vimsottari Dasa, we know that Vimsottari Dasa for United States is Rahu Mahadasa and Jupiter Antardasa. So how these transit planets are impacting the presidential elections, and who could be the possible, I re-emphasize one more time, who could be the possible presidential candidate who is going to win on that day. These predictions are all based on my astrological knowledge. To the best I can, I did the analysis, and using the best logical methods that I am aware of, I am presenting this presentation. Please use this for educational purposes only, and I don't I'm not responsible for any of the outcomes. If anyone has taken any decisions or expressed their opinions based on this video, I do not owe the responsibility. Enjoy the video. Thank you. This is part 2 of the presentation titled USA Presidential Elections, and in this part what I'm going to do is I'm going to identify all the presidential elections that had been held in United States during Rahu Mahadasa. As I said earlier, this is the third round of Vimsottari Dasa for United States, and that means the Rahu Mahadasa that started in 2016. This is the third time the Rahu Mahadasa came for United States. So let's first go and analyze who were the presidents in the first and second Rahu Mahadasa, and when was the elections happened, and where was the transit Rahu at the time on the day of the elections was happened during the first and the second Rahu Mahadasas, and then I'll go more in detail when it comes to the third Rahu Mahadasa, which was started in July 2016. After searching on the internet, I came to know that the website, this is the website where the greenpapers.com, that is the website where you can get the list of all US presidential elections held, like when was the election held, who won, and which party is the candidate belongs to. So what I did was I just picked up the presidential elections during the first, second, and the third Rahu Mahadasas. And what I noticed is there were around 8 to 9 presidential elections that had happened during this first, second Rahu Mahadasa, and during the third Rahu Mahadasa there was only one election that was happened on 8th November 2016. This is the summary from a high level perspective, like when the presidential elections have happened, where are the transit planet residing on that day specifically. Like for example, the first presidential election that was happened was on 7th January 1789. George Washington got re-elected. Actually, in 1776, when the independence came, I think 1776, there George Washington was the president, but the democratic election happened was on 7th January 1789, and George Washington was elected, and at that time there was no party that he was representing. So on 7th January 1789, when I look at the transit planets, Rahu is in the first house, and when I looked at the transit planets and superimposed on the natal chart of the country, what I noticed is that Rahu is in the first house, Saturn is in the fourth house, Jupiter is in the ninth house from Rashi Lagna, and Mars is in the second house, and Sun is in the second house. See, look at it. In January, Sun is not debiliated, so Sun is in the second house. So we'll go in detail at that time. And then from 1792 onwards, the first Tuesday in November is fixed as the election date, and for the first time in 2nd November 1792, John Adams was elected, and you can see there is Rahu is in the 11th house. But if you go back and look at all the way in 1900, on 6th November 1900, when Rahu was in the first house, Teddy Roosevelt was being elected, and the same person was re-elected in 1904, and in 1908 William Taft, at that time Rahu was in 8th house. And then when you look at 2016 November 8th, Rahu was in 10th house. Oh god, that's a king. 10th house is career for the country too, and or the parliament or the president. And then Saturn is in the first house. So if you look at it, which planet is in the first house is very important. When you're which transit planet is in the first house is very important when an election has been happened, and it is that transit planet that decides who will be the who who might be, which presidential candidate might be, is there a chance to get to win the elections. Like I said, in 1770, between 1776 and 1796 is the Rahu Mahadasa running for the first Rahu Mahadasa is running, and in 1788 or 1789 George Washington was elected, and he ran all the way till 1792. I think in 1792 also he got elected. So you will see him being elected twice. And in 1796, just before the Rahu Mahadasa is about to get completed, John Adams got elected. The very first election that happened on 7th January 1789, I ignored it completely. So I started analyzing from the next election, which is means only the elections that had happened in from November onwards. That is the first time, the first Tuesday in November when the elections was happened was in 1792. The election date was 2nd November 1792. In 1789, George Washington got elected. So in 1792, he stood again for the elections and he got re-elected. So now let's go and look at on 2nd November 1792. First of all, where are the transit planets, which is on your left side of the screen? Saturn is in Aries. So Saturn got debiliated or Nicha. That's very important here. Saturn was Nicha. And then Saturn's direct aspect is on, oh sorry, by the way, Sun is in Libra. Sun is also Nicha. So the two important planets, Saturn and Sun, they both are in Nicha or debiliated. And Saturn's have direct aspect is on Sun. That, and of course Mercury and Jupiter are also there. So this is just what you can see here is that Saturn's direct aspect is on Sun. That's very important here. And now on the election day, what's a Mahadasa? Rahu Mahadasa, Moon Antardasa, and Saturn Pratyantardasa. That's so Saturn's Pratyantardasa is running in United States natal chart. Saturn is the 3rd and 4th house lord. Moon is residing in the house owned by Saturn. Saturn is in the 11th house from Rashi Lagna. Now let's go and look at the transit planets. Transit Rahu is co-joined with natal Saturn in the 11th house. Thus, okay. And transit Sun is debiliated in the 12th house. Transit Saturn is debiliated in the 5th house. So that's what it is. And now comes a Mars. Natal Mars, which is residing in the 8th house from Rashi Lagna. Natal Sun is residing in the 8th house from Rashi Lagna. So natal Mars 4th aspect is on natal Saturn and transit Rahu. Mars is the Lagnadipati. So once again, it's the Saturn and Rahu having a co-relationship with Mars is very important to tell that the event, the person, whoever gets elected, what type of the person could that be. And then here Sun, Saturn's 10th aspect is on Sun, natal Sun and natal Mars. And if you look at it, natal transit Mars is in the 2nd house and having a direct aspect on natal Mars. So what you can tell here is Mars, the Lagnadipati, became very strong here. It has co-joined with the Sun, the king of the country, and it's having a 4th aspect on Saturn and Rahu, the two malefics, and at the same time Saturn's 10th aspect is on Sun and Mars. So the Lagnadipati and the Sun is the king. So this is what happened on that day when the transit planets are there. That is the day on election day, the transit planets and its co-joining and aspects are being mentioned, explained here. The second round of Rahu Mahadasa started in 1896 and lasted for until 1914. That's approximately 18 years. So if you look at it, in this 18 years, there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, approximately. There are 5 elections happened in 18 years. In this 18-year span, there are 5 elections happened, and the first one is 1896. William McKinley won in 1896, and Teddy Roosevelt won in 1900 and 1904, and William Taft won in 1908. I'm not considering 1912 at this point. So that's what it is. So here you can see is that the possibility of getting re-elected happened only once, and that was for Teddy Roosevelt in 1900 and again in 1904. So that's what we need to look at it at this point when the second Rahu Mahadasa was there for the country. So when we start the election was on 3rd November 1896. This is the first election during the second Rahu Mahadasa. But as soon as the Rahu Mahadasa started in 1896, the very first election happened was on 3rd November 1896. And if you look at it, where are the transit planets? Moon is in the first of all, Saturn is exalted. Oh my, is in Libra. Sun, the king, is Nicha or debiliated. From now onwards, every November Sun will be debiliated on election day. The Sun will be debiliated. So the role of Sun is not, transit Sun is not that much when it comes to the point of who will get elected. It's a Saturn and Rahu and probably a little bit about Mars. So only 3 planets we need to look at it, the 3 transit planets we need to look at it when it comes to the election results for the United States. So here Saturn is exalted for sure, and transit Sun is Nicha, and Rahu is in Capricorn. Capricorn is a 3rd house, and if you look at it, transit Rahu's direct aspect is on the 9th house, Dharmasthanamu, where natal Rahu is residing, and the 8th house Lord Mercury is also residing. So, and that's, I don't want to talk about what type of president would have been elected. And then transit Mars is in the 8th house. 8th house is not always good. So transit Mars is in the 8th house, co-joined with natal Mars, natal Sun, and of course the 2nd house Lord Jupiter. And then the most important is Moon. Transit Moon until 11 p.m. transit Moon has co-joined with Sun. That means while the elections were happening, transit Moon is with Saturn, natal Saturn. And a transit Saturn is already exalted there. Transit Rahu is having a direct aspect with natal Rahu. So this tells you that it's a Rahu and Saturn. They both might have played a crucial role in identifying who out of the 2, 1 or 2, whatever the 2 or 3, how many presidential candidates were there on that day, identifying who would be the best person to win the election, and it's found that William McKinley was the one who won that election. The next one comes is 6th November 1900. And if you look at 6th November 1900, Rahu is in the first, transit Rahu is in the very first house. The 8th house Lord Mercury is also in the first house. So that's a very crucial combination, is transit Rahu and transit Mercury are co-joined and in the first house. And when you look at the country's chart, natal Rahu and natal Mercury are also co-joined in the Dharmasthanamu, the 9th house. So the person gets elected should have a strong Rahu in the person's chart, so that the person, whoever the native has a strong Rahu in his or her chart, will be the one who will get elected. And also, if you look at the transit Mars is co-joined with natal Rahu and natal Mercury in the Dharmasthanamu too. And transit Saturn is in the 2nd house, having a direct aspect with natal Mars and natal Sun. And as usual, transit Sun is debiliated in the 12th house. So I stopped considering transit Sun anymore for all these analysis when it comes to the country's presidential elections, because it happens in November, and Sun will always be Nicha. So the only thing that's important is Saturn is in the 2nd house, having a direct aspect with natal Mars and natal Sun. Transit Mars is co-joined with natal Rahu and natal Mercury, and transit Rahu and transit Mercury are both in the first house on the day the election has happened. So let's go and see the election results on 8th November 1904. That is and Teddy Roosevelt, who was first time elected in 1900, got re-elected in November 1904. So let's see where are the important transit planets on that day. Saturn is in the 3rd house, its own house Capricorn, and it's in the third house and it's having a direct aspect with natal Rahu and natal Venus in the ninth house, the Dharmasthanamo. So that's what we have to keep in mind, is that Saturn, transit Saturn is having a direct aspect on natal Rahu and the 8th house lord Mercury. Natal Saturn is already using its 10th aspect, is already looking at 8th house where you have natal Mars and natal Sun. So transit Saturn is now looking at the 8th house lord Mercury. And then comes the most important, is the next one is Rahu. Transit Rahu is in the 10th house from Rashi Lagna from in the United States chart. And if you look at it, the ninth house lord Mercury moon is having a direct aspect on transit Rahu in the 10th house. So the Dharmasthanadipati, more natal Rahu is residing in the ninth house. The ninth house lord moon is having a mutual aspect with the transit Rahu, and that too in the 10th house. And then comes the third planet that I always look at, is the Mars. Transit Mars is in 11th house from Rashi Lagna on the natal chart, which is Virgo, and you have natal Saturn residing there. So transit Mars is co-joined with natal Mars. Remember, natal Mars 4th aspect is on natal Saturn, and now natal Mars 4th aspect is on transit Mars, and natal Saturn's 10th aspect is on natal Mars too. So the relationship between Saturn and Mars is permanent, the natal planets. So the only thing that has to make is, where are the transit Saturns and transit Mars, and of course transit Rahu, where are these three planets on the election day? And Mars, the Lagnadipati, has co-joined with the Saturn, and transit Saturn's direct aspect is on Rahu, and Rahu is in the 10th house and having a direct aspect from natal moon. So this tells you that what type of the president might get elected based upon these transit planets. The next one is again in 1908, 4 years later. It's on 3rd November 1908, and if you look at it, the third time Teddy Roosevelt did not couldn't go for the third time, so a new candidate came in, William Taft, and William Taft got elected on that day. So let's go and see where are the three important transit planets on that day. That means keep in mind, a new guy got elected here. First two times, 1900 and 1904, we got the same person. In 1908, we got a new guy elected. Now, when you look at transit Saturn is in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th house. 5th house from Rashi Lagna, that is in pieces, and transit Saturn's direct aspect is on natal Saturn. And you already see transit Mars is co-joined with natal Saturn there. So transit Saturn is looking at natal Saturn. Transit Saturn is also looking at transit Mars, and natal Saturn is and the natal Mars are having mutual aspects, like Mars 4th aspect is on natal Saturn and Saturn's 10th aspect is on natal Mars. And above all, transit Rahu is in the 8th house. The most important thing that we need to see is, where is transit Rahu? Transit Rahu is in the 8th house on the election day. So what you can see is that whenever transit Rahu is co-joined with the Sun or Mars or Saturn, the election is something odd is happening here. Now let's go and look at the last election in the second Rahu Mahadasa, which is in the year 1912. The election was held on 5th November 1912, and the previously elected candidate in 1908 was not re-elected. We got another new candidate in this year 1912. So remember, in 1908 we got a new candidate. Again in 1912 we got a new candidate. So let's see where is transit Rahu in 1912. I mean to say that on the election day, transit Rahu is in Pisces, which is the fifth house from Rashi Lagna on the natal chart. And the transit Rahu's direct aspect is on natal Saturn. So there's a relationship between natal Saturn and transit Rahu now. Now let's go and look at transit Saturn. Transit Saturn is in the 7th house from Rashi Lagna, and transit Saturn is directly looking at the first house. And transit Mars has co-joined with debiliated transit Sun in the 12th house. So when you look at it, the transit Rahu is having a relationship with natal Saturn. Transit Saturn is having a relationship with the first house. The very important here is the first house. And transit Mars has co-joined with transit Sun. And that resulted into a new person coming up as a president and not getting the older one getting re-elected. For the third time, Rahu Mahadasa started for the United States in July 2016. So it started in July 2016 and we had the very first election in November 2016. It is on 8th November 2016. So let's go and look at the transit planets at that time. At that time means on that day. The first and the foremost thing is this day, 8th November 2016, from astrological perspective is a very, very important day, because on that day, 8th November, if you look at the transit planets which is on your left side of the screen, all the planets are between the axis of Rahu and Ketu. So that indicates that there are no planets that are outside their axis, which is nothing but it's a Kala Sarpa Yoga or a dosha depending upon the way you look at it. So Rahu Mahadasa is running for the country. You have a Kala Sarpa Yoga or a dosha on that day. So that and an election is on that day, on 8th November. So that clearly tells you that something unique which has never been expected is going to happen because of Rahu Mahadasa transit and the Kala Sarpa Yoga from Rahu Ketu. Now, and if you look at the transit planets after superimposing on the natal chart of the country, first and the foremost Rahu, since it is Rahu Mahadasa and a Kala Sarpa Yoga, I start with Rahu, Transit Rahu. Transit Rahu is in the 10th house from Rashi Lagna. So the 10th house always deals with the career in general, and from the 10th house from Transit Rahu is having a mutual direct aspect with Moon, the 9th house Lord Dharmasthanadipati Moon. Remember, I think in one of these elections, in the previous elections, Transit Rahu was also in the 10th house, having a direct aspect on Moon, 9th house Lord Dharmasthanadipati, and natal Rahu and the 8th house Lord Mercury is in the house owned by Moon, the Dharmasthanamo, the 9th house. And then comes Transit Mars. Transit Mars is in Capricorn in that is the 3rd house from Rashi Lagna. But transit Mars, remember Mars is the Lagnadipati. So transit Mars, the Lagnadipati, is having a direct aspect on the 9th house Dharmasthanamo, where natal Rahu and the 8th house Lord Mercury is residing. And then comes the transit Saturn. Transit Saturn is in the 1st house. And as usual, transit Sun is Nicha, is in the 12th house. So if you look at it, like I said earlier, for most of the crucial or unexpected results, or a non-conventional person getting elected happens when there is a direct relationship between transit Mars or transit Transit Saturn with natal Rahu or transit Rahu. So these three planets, Mars, Saturn and Rahu, whether it is natal or transit, when they are having a strong relationship, which is nothing but either co-joining it or having a direct aspect, that's a strong relationship, and the relationship will be extremely strong if they are co-joined and in the house owned by Mars or in the house owned by Saturn, then the bondage will be extremely strong. And you can see it here in the Kalasarpa Yoga or Dosha period, transit planet positionings. You have Mars residing in Capricorn and looking at natal Rahu, and transit Rahu is in the 10th house looking at the Dharmasthanadipati. Mars is looking at Rahu and the 8th house lord. 8th house deals with secrets or secret affairs, and which is Mercury. And already natal Mars is residing in the 8th house itself. So Saturn, Mars and Rahu transit planets, these three transit planets had created an environment where, because of the Kalasarpa Yoga or Dosha, the results, the election results will be peculiar, unexpected, and it will be a shocking for a lot of people. As I said in the previous slide, that there was a day earlier when transit Rahu was in the 9th house on election day, and what I noticed is that it was on 8th November 1904. If you look at it, it's on the left side of the screen, is the election day on 8th November 1904. Transit Rahu is in the 10th house, having a direct aspect with the natal moon, the 9th house lord. And exactly on 8th November 2016, that's almost 100 years later, transit Rahu is again in the 10th house from Rashi Lagna on the United States chart and having a direct aspect on the Dharmasthanadipati moon. Natal Rahu is in the 9th house, the Dharmasthanamu. Now transit Rahu is having a direct aspect on the Dharmasthanadipati. This is the and the second common thing that I've noticed here is on both the days, both on 8th November 1904 or 8th November 2016, on both the days, natal Rahu is having a direct aspect on one of the most malefic planet, either a transit Mars or transit Saturn. So these are the two commonalities that I noticed for these on these days, on these 2 days. And now the question comes is, since on both the days it was a Rahu Mahadasa running, so something unique has to happen which was never anticipated. Now going back to the history, in 1904, Teddy Roosevelt got re-elected on that day, this date, 8th November 1904, and he was the first president since 86 to get re-elected. So that is something that has never happened earlier, has happened in 1904, and which was not expected, had happened in 1904. Now moving forward all the way 100 years, and again in 2016 on 8th November, we had a president who was elected that nobody has expected, and that was a surprise to it was not a common as a career politician who got elected as the president of the country, and the election itself was a big surprise to the whole world. So exactly what I'm trying to explain here is that when transit Rahu is in the 10th house from in the natal chart of the United States, something odd which was never anticipated or expected or never dreamt of will happen, and it has proved in 1904 and again in 2016. So let's go and look at the candidate who won the election in 2016, President Donald Trump, his chart, and look at the transit planets on that day, on the day he won that election. If you look at it on 8th November 2016, we have a Kalasarpa Yoga or a Dosha based upon the transit planets, and for the candidate on 14th June 1946. When the candidate was born, he was born under the influence of Kalasarpa Yoga or dosha. So this tells you that the impact of the Rahu, the role of Rahu, how when the transit planets are in Kalasarpa Yoga, how the Rahu, transit Rahu is having a role on the candidate is clearly visible here. Another thing you can see here is that transit Rahu on the election day when he had a Kalasarpa Yoga, and when you superimpose the transit Rahu on the native's chart, you see that transit Rahu is on the first house on his Lagna, and Mars, natal Mars, the most malefic planet, natal Mars is residing there in Lagna. That's a very important thing that you have to see here. And the Lagnadipati Sun is already co-joined with natal Sun, already co-joined with natal Rahu in his 10th house. So with the natal Rahu co-joining with the for Lagnadipati Sun and transit Rahu residing in the Lagna, the very first house, and co-joined with Mars, the most malefic planet, it clearly tells you that the candidate, that Kalasarpa Yoga on that day had amplified the ability for the candidate to win the elections, and whatever the winning mode is, whether it is through unconventional ways or a surprise or whatever that is, the outcome is the native will win the election. This is exactly what happened on this day. So let's go and look at the person, the candidate who won the election in 2016, President Donald Trump, his chart, and look at the transit planets on that day, on the day he won that election. If you look at it, on 8th November 2016, we have a Kalasarpa Yoga or a dosha based upon the transit planets, and for the candidate on 14th June 1946, when the candidate was born, he was born under the influence of Kalasarpa Yoga or dosha. So this tells you that the impact of the Rahu, the role of Rahu, how when the transit planets are in Kalasarpa Yoga, how the Rahu, transit Rahu is having a role on the candidate is clearly visible here. Another thing you can see here is that transit Rahu on the election day when he had a Kalasarpa Yoga, and when you superimpose the transit Rahu on the native's chart, you see that transit Rahu is on the first house on his Lagna, and Mars, natal Mars, the most malefic planet, natal Mars is residing there in Lagna. That's a very important thing that you have to see here. And the Lagnadipati Sun is already co-joined with natal Sun, already co-joined with natal Rahu in his 10th house. So with the natal Rahu co-joining with the for Lagnadipati Sun and transit Rahu residing in the Lagna, the very first house, and co-joined with Mars, the most malefic planet, it clearly tells you that the candidate, that Kalasarpa Yoga on that day had amplified the ability for the candidate to win the elections, and whatever the winning mode is, whether it is through unconventional ways or a surprise or whatever that is, the outcome is the native will win the election. This is exactly what happened on this day. On 31st October 2016, I posted my a small presentation about doing the analysis for the election just 1 week from then onwards, which is on 8th November 2016, and I had gone through the birth charts of the then two presidential candidates, Hillary Clinton for Democratic Party and Donald Trump for the Republican Party, superimposed their individual charts on the country's chart, and then further superimposed the transit planets, and finally in that presentation, that is 8 days before the actual elections had. I predicted that Donald Trump is the candidate who will be winning the elections here, and that particular presentation is still available in YouTube. The link you can see below, and in that video, if you go all the way to the 50, it's a 55 to 56 minutes video. But if you want to know exactly what was my final conclusion, go all the way to the 53rd minute, and from 53rd minute till 56th minute, if you listen to that 3 minutes, you will, what you are seeing on the screen is what you will see there. But there you can listen to my prediction, final conclusion, that Mr. Trump will be the candidate who is going to win the election in November 2016, and this I predicted on 31st October 2016. Let me end this video presentation with the takeaway points. I have spent so much time in explaining in detail the different astrological combinations, their impact, and the transit planets' impact on the country. Let me end the presentation with some takeaway points. The first and the foremost takeaway point here is, for the country United States, the core revenue is only through two major planets. One is Jupiter. Jupiter deals with academics and research, and the second is Mercury. Mercury deals with exports of large goods. This is clearly visible for everyone whoever has seen how the country's revenues are being earned. This is clearly visible. The second thing is, according to Vimsottari Mahadasa, Vimsottari Dasa system, Rahu Mahadasa started for the third time in July 2016. So anytime Rahu Mahadasa starts, what usually happens for Rahu during the Rahu Mahadasa, whether it is for the country or for a native, is that there are a lot of unexpected things. Rahu will make it happen, and Rahu shows that I can do what you couldn't ever expect to happen. So that is, it's always surprises. That's the reason why in one of my presentation, when Rahu was in the 6th house for the country, 6th house deals with the diseases and public health. I mentioned that there will be some sort of a diseases that are unknown to the people, or disease is known but nobody knows how to cure the disease. That's exactly the same way in the Mahadasa also. Rahu will be doing something that nobody has expected. For example, after July 2016, the first presidential election happened was in November 2016, and no one expected that a businessman with no political background will become the president of this country, and it was a big shock to the whole country. Even the political pundits, nobody expected that to happen, and it happened. So these type of shocks is what Rahu gives during his Mahadasa. The next thing is, since Rahu, natal Rahu is in the house. Where is the natal Rahu? Rahu decides how the country is to be ruled. And if you look at the natal Rahu from Rashi Lagna is in the 9th house. 9th house deals with law and order, law and courts, or the Dharmasthanamo. And usually Rahu is the one who decides how the courts has to behave, what type of judgments will the court give, and what type of laws needs to be passed in the country. Since 2016, when the Rahu Mahadasa started, people who are residing in United States or who are monitoring the laws that have been passed in the country or the judgments that the court has given, is most of them, I won't say all of them, most of them are so surprising that nobody has expected such type of things to happen. Just like the presidential election, the laws in the country have been, new laws have been come up, or the old that has shocked the people, or the old laws were being closed, and which has shocked the people too. In the same way as the court decisions. And now it comes in November 2020, according to Vimsottari Dasa system, Rahu, it will be Rahu Mahadasa and Jupiter Antardasa. So we have to see is where is natal Jupiter. Natal Jupiter is in the 8th house from Rashi Lagna and the 5th house from Chandra Lagna. But since it is the natal Jupiter, we have to look from the Rashi Lagna, which is Rashi Lagna tells you the destiny. Then we have to go back and see like where is transit Jupiter at the time of elections. The elections is in November 2020. Transit Jupiter will be in the 11th house at the time of elections. While the elections are going on, it will be in the 11th house and from natal moon, and from 11th house the natal moon, transit Jupiter is having a direct aspect on natal Jupiter, natal Sun, natal Mars and natal Venus, and transit Rahu will be in the 4th house. So this is the takeaway point at this point. So now that I had given you the whole astrological definitions and explanations, let me tell you in simple English, what does that mean to the country and the people residing in the country. The conclusions. First and the foremost is the results might get delayed. The results in the sense the election results might get delayed. And there is a high possibility that even the result that got delayed might be decided either in the court or based upon some laws and interpreting some of the laws, and then a decision has been made by interpretation of those laws, and whatever it is going to create a big shock, just like 2016 November. Again in 2020 November, these election results will give a big shock to the whole country, and not just the country, even though I will not be surprised if it shocks the whole world. And the last conclusion that I am trying to tell here is there is an extremely high possibility for the repetition of the election that happened in the year 2000, where the courts had come into picture and declared who will be the president of the country. I hope I try to explain to the best I can, at least in these takeaway points in simple English. And let me what I'm going to do in the next presentation. There are 2 more presentations to go. In the next presentation, part 2, I'm going to go backwards and see during the Rahu Mahadasa, when in the first Vimsottari Dasa cycle, Rahu Mahadasa happened from 1896 till 1940. Sorry, the second one. The first one happened from 1776 to 1796, and the second one happened from 1896 to 1914. Exactly after 100 years, Rahu Mahadasa came. So during these two, the first Rahu Mahadasa, there were 2 elections. In the second Rahu Mahadasa, if I remember correctly, there are 4 elections. So I'm trying to analyze that during the Rahu Mahadasa on these elections day, how did the election results come up? Did the election results surprise the people during that time or not? Once we analyze the data that is available and understand how Rahu Mahadasa and the transit Rahu are having an impact on the election results, in part 3 I'm going to predict, I'm going to say like who could be the possible candidate, who can be the president of, who can get elected or selected. I should say it as elected as 20% and selected as 80% in November 2020. Thank you for watching this video. So let's start analyzing each transit planets, its impact on the natal chart for the United States. These are the transit planets position is on 3rd November 2020, that is the election date. Let me start with Rahu. Transit Rahu will be in the 7th house from Rashi Lagna and the 4th house from Chandra Lagna. Residing over there, transit Rahu direct aspect is on the 1st house from Rashi Lagna and the 10th house from Chandra Lagna. So which houses are going to get impacted because of this transit planet? It's the 1st house, because it is having a direct aspect on the 1st house. The 1st house deals with the condition of the cabinet, and because it is residing in the fourth house from Chandra Lagna, the fourth house deals with the weather and agriculture. Because it is residing in the seventh house from Rashi Lagna, seventh house deals with foreign relations. And the most important is it is residing in the 10th house from Chandra Lagna. So the ruling party, the ruler, or the administration. So all these houses get impacted because of this transit Rahu during on that specific day. Let's go on now look at the second transit planet, Saturn. Transit Saturn is going to be in the third house from Rashi Lagna, and that is the 12th house from Chandra Lagna, and it's residing over there. Transit planet's direct aspect is on the 9th house from Rashi Lagna and the 6th house from Chandra Lagna. This is only the direct aspect we are seeing because the direct aspect is very powerful. But Saturn's third aspect, transit Saturn's third aspect is on the 2nd house from Chandra Lagna, where you have the transit Mars residing. Just keep in mind, this is very important. And transit Saturn's 10th aspect is on Libra, where transit Sun got Nicha. Nicha means debilitated, and transit Mercury, the 8th house Lord transit Mercury is residing. So when you look at transit Saturn, its direct aspect is on Rahu and the 8th house Lord Mercury in the Dharmasthanamo. Its third aspect is on the 2nd house where the Lagnadipati Mars is residing, and its 10th aspect is on the 12th house from Rashi Lagna where the Sun got Nicha or debilitated, and the 8th house Lord Mercury, transit Mercury is again residing. So if you look at it from transit Saturn is looking at the natal Mercury and the transit Mercury at the same time. One is a direct aspect, the other is a 10th aspect. And now let's go and look at which houses are going to get impacted. The third house is because from Rashi Lagna it is the third house. So the third house is transportation industry and the newspapers, which comes under communications also. The sixth house is because it is aspecting the sixth house from Chandra Lagna. So the sixth house is diseases and public health. It is having a direct aspect on the 9th house from Rashi Lagna, which is law and order and courts, and it's having the 12th house because it is residing in the 12th house from Chandra Lagna. It deals with hospitals and prisons, etc. So let's see what is the impact going to be. The impact will be on public health due to diseases, and which results into extensive hospitalizations, and in return because of these increased public health issues, there will be some disturbances in law and order. Finally, let's go and look at the third important transit planet, which is Mars. The reason I'm talking about Mars here is because Mars is the Lagnadipati for the country, and it is residing in the 8th house from Rashi Lagna and the 5th house from Chandra Lagna. So along with Saturn and Rahu, Mars is also being considered. The transit planet Mars is also being considered. So when you look at the transit planet Mars, it will be in the 2nd house from Chandra Lagna and the 5th house from Rashi Lagna. Transit Mars residing in the 2nd house from Chandra Lagna. It is from the third aspect from transit Saturn. Transit Mars is looking over there. That's a very important thing you have to see. The second thing is transit Mars direct aspect is on the 11th house from Rashi Lagna, where natal Saturn is residing. So keep in mind, transit Mars direct aspect is on natal Saturn. Transit Saturn's third aspect is on transit Mars. So transit Mars is now getting some sort of a relationship with both natal Saturn and transit Saturn. That's a very important thing here we have to keep in mind. And then comes the question is, what is transit Saturn's 8th aspect? Transit Saturn's 8th aspect is on Libra, where you have the Lord Sun, the law king Sun deals with leadership or the king, and the king got Nicha here. Sun got Nicha here there, and but at the same time, there is transit Mercury is also residing there, and Mercury transit Mercury is the 8th house lord from Rashi Lagna, and that's a very important, and 8th house lord even from Chandra Lagna too. So the most important thing here is transit Mars is having an aspect on natal Saturn, that's a direct aspect, and transit Mars 8th aspect is on transit Sun and transit Mercury. So let's go and see what houses is it going to have any major impact. The major impact will be on 2nd house revenue, 5th house sports and entertainment, and 8th house, this is very important, 8th house treasury and large scale losses, 11th house is parliament, legislation or legislative members. So if you look at it, because transit Saturn have an impact on the 6th house and the 12th house, which is public health, diseases and hospitalization, here transit Mars is having impact on the 8th house, which is large scale losses. Remember I told you that the transit Mars is having a relationship with transit Saturn and natal Saturn. So whatever transit Saturn is going to have an impact on it, Mars is going to amplify it here. Finally, let me tell you the takeaway points from this part, second part. First and the foremost is because Rahu has so much of influence in due to its Mahadasa, just like Rahu, how he behaved in 2016 November, even in 2020 November, no one can expect how Rahu is going to behave. That's the first and the foremost. Second, since Rahu is in the 9th house, which is the Dharmasthanamo, and it has co-joined with the 8th house Lord Mercury, how the impact will be, elections, who gets elected or the person who gets defeated, how the person will behave, nobody can tell anything about that, because Rahu is the one there. What nobody has ever expected earlier, Rahu is going to do that. And third, since the reason why I was so emphasizing that about 2 points is because it's the Rahu Mahadasa, and Jupiter Antardasa is minor, but Rahu Mahadasa. Jupiter Antardasa is the reason is Jupiter is in the 8th house from Rashi Lagna, co-joined with the Sun and Mars. The most important things, Mars is the 1st house lord, and also Jupiter is the 2nd house. Transit Jupiter is in the 2nd house revenues, having a direct aspect on natal Jupiter. So Jupiter had become much stronger here, and to add further, we are seeing the Jupiter Antardasa at the time of elections. And the fourth important point that I want to say here is transit Mars is having a direct aspect on natal Saturn, and transit Saturn is having a direct aspect on natal Rahu and the 8th house Lord Mercury. Because of these two combinations, the Rahu, whatever he wants to do, these two combinations will amplify whatever Rahu is decided to do, and make the whole world surprise it, give a shock to the whole world. So, and there's a high possibility for uncertainty because of Rahu. And just to end this presentation, these are just my predictions. There's no guarantee that it's going to happen, and I don't take the responsibility for, even if anybody uses these predictions and come up with something, I owed no responsibility for that. These are just predictions to the best of my astrological knowledge. Thank you very much for watching this video.